Well, thank you everybody for joining today. My name is David Levine. If you don't know me, I've been in cybersecurity for about 25 years, and I'm always looking at what's emerging and new trends. And today we're going to talk about ransomware. So we're going to dive into the critical and evolving topic in the cybersecurity world of ransomware. And I'm thrilled to have two experts here with us regarding this subject. I have Bob Varnadoe and Ken Foster. So Bob, if you want to go first, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Happy to be here. Bob Varnadoe. I've been in the security world for almost 30 years now, and I've been in security leadership for 25 plus of that, including as CISO of Fortune 500 company.
Thank you. And Ken?
Hey, Ken Foster. Appreciate you guys having me on. I have too been in cyber now for about 30 years, and in leadership positions for probably the last 15, give or take, in the cybersecurity world. And today I'm CISO at a company called Candescent, but kind of been in multiple verticals: fintech, manufacturing, federal government space. Just kind of bounced around a little bit everywhere. So good to see you.
Appreciate it. I appreciate you both being here, and your vast knowledge that you're going to be able to bring to this topic. So I'm just going to start, with the general question and level set this, right? And we'll start with the basics. So in your own words, can you both try to explain why ransomware is still such a huge threat today?
Sure, I'll start off. I think ransomware has been around for quite a long time at this point, and unfortunately, we haven't figured it out yet. It started off as something that really targeted endpoints, and we saw a rash of encrypting laptops and desktops, and that morphed into attacks against data center environments, and increasingly has become more sophisticated criminal activity, where now we see a virtual cottage industry that has sprung up to manage these kind of attacks, including the access brokers that find a way in, who then might sell that access to an actual attacker, and there may even be a third group that manages the business of negotiation and payment. So it certainly continues to evolve, and as we mature our controls, the attackers are continuing to ramp up their capabilities to meet those sophisticated solutions that we bring to bear. And it's not just large organizations. I think those are the things that we see in the Wall Street Journal most often, but there's lots of small businesses that have been really severely impacted by these kinds of attacks, and in some cases, business ending resolutions to those. So I don't think this is something that we've really seen the end of yet, but certainly the sophistication continues to increase.
That's excellent. Thanks, Bob. Ken, how about yourself? How do you see it, right? And
Well, I mean, everything Bob just said I agree with, but the truth is because it's easy. It is the easiest access point probably out there, because it's very difficult to protect the human from themselves. And because there's a lot of times this plays, the entry point is getting the person to click on something or to open something that they perceive as I think people have it's almost a FOMO thing, right? They have a fear of missing out if they don't click on that link or they don't open that up. And, that's why it's so easy. And I agree with Bob 100%. I mean, the bigger your Fortune 1000 up companies are spending effort and putting tools in place to block this. This is probably a bigger, or I won't say block it, but mitigate it, right? Try to mitigate it as much as they can. When you get into these smaller shops that can't afford to have that level of protection and mitigation, they're such an easy target. And the truth is the level of sophistication a lot of times at that level of company on the end user is a little lower, because it's not something that they're inundated with and maybe getting training and awareness about during their normal cycle of their job. And it just makes it a very easy, very quick to monetize market. And I think that's why we've seen it grow as much as it has grown, right? It's not going down. We keep hearing about new product in the market, new people trying to figure out how to do this. The number of attacks is just going up. So it's still just the easiest way to get in is my, kind of how I look at it.
Excellent. So based upon that, right, it sounds like even with all the new technology and everything we have in place, it's really about the people. So how do we change that mindset of the employees to make sure they're not the weak link in the security chain?
Well, I think that's that's a common problem, and again, one that organizations are trying to get more sophisticated with. I mean, certainly there's lots of approaches to educate end users, but it's a game of escalation. As we have seen more capabilities on the part of the attackers, we've had to do more training for end users to educate them, and there's been some pretty sensational reports in the media about the use of new technology like AI to create deep fakes that make that even harder to to combat. So I think again it's a game of escalation that we continue to see evolving.
Excellent. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more you can say about it. It just is. The problem is, like I said, it's getting people to care about it, right?
Oh.
But it's also getting people just to slow down, like I said, and have that. I've seen, and I'll go back to some awareness training, right? I've seen awareness training in a Fortune 500 company where we get inundated all the time with it. And we got one of the highest click-through rates we ever had because we sent people a flight itinerary and said your flight from a location that we didn't even have an office in to another location that we didn't even have an office in. And everyone was clicking on it. And I'm like, you don't live in California and you don't or work in California. You don't live or work in, I think it was Texas or something like that. It was like, you don't live or work in either one of these states. Why would you be getting a flight itinerary that's asking you to log in and check on this? But it's the people just don't think through why it's important or why that I think there's a fear, and this probably is a little bit about our society in the U.S. anyway, our workforce is a fear of not clicking on something and getting in trouble for not looking at it and acknowledging that they got an email, even if that. And then the other part of that is I think getting people to understand it's okay if you see it and say the old see something, say something. It's okay to come tell me that this stuff's coming in. I don't blame you for it coming in. You're getting attacked with it, but you do need to come let us know so we can tune and get better about it. But I always try to relate it back to, think about if this was your home computer and you're doing all your banking and you have all your valuable information, even if it's pictures on it, and you clicked on one of these and lost access to it. At least in our environments of corporate world, we might be able to back it up and have it backed up, might be able to get it rebuilt for you quickly. Most people at home don't have that. So I try to always relate it to them as what if this happened at your house? What would it mean? So now think through and start slow down a little bit, read it, and figure that out from there.
All right, that's some good advice. So you were talking about technology, you were talking about people, with FOMO, especially when it comes to work, and even with all the technology, right? So I'll say we have phishing. I'll just say phishing attack awareness. You have these malware vendors or these email vendors that actually build it into their platform. You have these EDRs which look for it, right? They've been able to detect viruses and malware forever. So I understand from Bob that he said that technologies, was with AI and ML make it easy for people to kind of build these attacks. But what do you think we need? What new technologies will make it harder for ransomware to succeed? And Ken, this time I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, outside of being able to identify it quickly, and that's the problem, right? Is even what we've used in the past. Bob's bringing up the great point of where AI and ML are making it impossible now to detect bad grammar, misspell, broken English, something's just not right, or even the voice, the deep fake voice, the deep fake audio stuff. It's getting very hard. I mean, we're all getting inundated right now on our cell phones, right? With no matter where you've ever visited or they think you might be, with, hey, you haven't paid your toll pass text, please click on this, right? I got 3 this morning from, and one of them's from the UK. I was like, I flew through the UK yesterday. That's the closest I've ever been to having a toll set up, right? But we've got to be able to protect the user from themselves a little bit. So the best thing we can do is get tooling in place that is also using the AI and ML to counteract that, right? To look at these, to look at, and it almost, I want to say, and it's intrusive, but there's part of my brain that says, if I have an AI or an ML tool built into my email system and it sees a link in there, and it almost asks the person a question before it allows them to click on it, is like, do you actually have a toll system in the state of, have you ever had a toll system in the state of Florida, for example, right? And have you ever had them text you because you normally log into your system to update your toll information? So you almost want it to prompt them a little bit and ask them a question, just slow them down just enough to make them think about it. And it could be just as simple as, are you sure you want to click on this? Block it for a second and then let it through. Because you can't block everything, right? It changes too much. IPs change too much. I mean, I was somewhere the other day and we were talking about, and there's on one of these, I think it was actually on this toll thing, they're registering over 100,000 new domains like a day. So it's impossible to keep up with it. So, but automation, I think, is the answer. Automation and being able to use AI and ML to help defend it is really the only way I know to do it right now.
And it's a great point, right? Take the time. Don't be so quick to click on something. Think about it, right? And I think that's great. I also like your suggestion about using AI and ML in those emails. So that's great. Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think Ken's exactly right. And, you know, I think we're also seeing the emergence of some really encouraging use of AI ML in the SOC itself, you know, to really assist the security analysts that are working in the SOC and, you know, augmenting their capabilities. I think if we can get to the point where we do a better job of separating the noise from the things that the SOC should really focus on, I think we'll be able to level up our capabilities. And I'm encouraged by some of the new standalone technologies as well as add-ons for existing SOC technology that, you know, will really empower the analysts to do a better job of focusing on the most important things.
All right, thanks. Now, the one thing I have to ask, right, and I mentioned that we've been detecting malware for a while and antivirus, and you have these EDRs and XDRs, right, and all these things that are looking for this type of attack. So how are they getting through, right? I just saw something a few weeks ago where someone had KMS keys and they ransomed it in AWS. Yesterday, I actually wrote a blog on something that I saw where now Gmail is getting attacked as well, right? And EDR really can't be positioned to work on things in the cloud because they're endpoint detection and response, or XDR, right? So what would you say are actionable things that our audience can do to protect themselves from something like that?
I think you're right, David. I mean, we, you know, and this is a little bit of the, you know, the age-old problem with security, you know, because we're still overcoming the old mentality of, you know, castle and moat. And I think, you know, quite some time ago, as an industry, we acknowledged that, you know, the castle and moat philosophy is kind of gone. And, you know, the perimeter is so porous at this point that you really can't rely on those capabilities. But still, we tend to gravitate towards maybe less so today antivirus and firewalls, as I've got no reason to worry. And you're right, EDR probably is the, you know, I've got EDR, so I don't need to worry. And I think, you know, those are all important things. That's sort of table stakes at this point. And the basic blocking and tackling of security, of making sure you're current on patches, and you've got EDR deployed on your systems, all super important. You got to do that. Make sure you got MFA. I mean, there's a pretty well-known list at this point of things that we should be concerned with. Unfortunately, that's not enough anymore. And to your point, we've become reliant on third parties to the point where you just can't rely on EDR to solve all of your problems there, because typical third-party SaaS providers, I mean, you can't go to those big organizations and say, we're going to put EDR on your servers. I mean, that's just not how it works. So we got to figure out other ways to get those controls in place. And I think, that's a complicated model to develop, but you got to have the right segmentation in place and make sure that you've got isolation of your backups, and and that you're doing backups. There was a company I worked for in the past that went as far as having a tertiary backup, and we even did pen testing to make sure that you couldn't reach the tertiary backup from the core network. So, I think all of those things are important, necessary, but not sufficient.
All right, thanks. And Ken, so before, I have another question based on what Bob said. So you have your backups, and you have 4 or 5 levels of backups. Bob, you mentioned 3, but the backups still take time, right? And if I'm ransomed and I have an attack, I'm still down for some period of time, whether it's the fact that I have to pay the ransom or my customers are affected and my business is affected. It's still painful. So what would you say is a solution, since we just said EDRs don't work, right? That you're relying on backups. There's so much technology out there. And when I say being able to look at the source, right? Maybe having something that can look for that ransom attack on an S3 bucket or in Google or on file servers, right? What's your take on that?
So I think one of the things that we got to look at, and what Bob brought up is ultimately it's an architectural discussion about how your whole system is put together, because there's no one thing that's going to do this, right? In a perfect world, I would say you're segmented off. You've got all your access privileges set up. You got, probably at least tertiary backup set up, right? You've got immutable backups that are inaccessible. The bigger part is you're testing it. You're actually testing that, even though if it says it's backed up, that there actually are backups that you can restore, right? There are, because I've seen it too much in my career, and I also talked to too many people, horror stories that said, hey, we're backing up, and then you go find out, yeah, you've been backing up an empty backup. It has nothing in it, right? But then we get into how we deliver the applications and how we deliver and get into a data security piece of this. So backup's important. If I've got it in the cloud or I've got it in a bucket and I'm backing that up in hopefully multiple zones and multiple geolocations, and I'm encrypted and done all the things I'm supposed to do. But then let's think about how we're developing applications and delivering those applications. If I'm streaming an app, and I'm using streaming as a loose term, but if I'm only giving you access to the application and everything that you're doing is interacting at the application level, so what if your laptop gets encrypted? So what if the endpoint is encrypted in ransomware? If I'm isolated and built my network right, it gets isolated. I re-image it or give you a VDI to work on. You can still access the applications and the data that allows you to do your job, right? Because they were never impacted by your endpoint, which is the common entry point for ransomware. I'm not saying it doesn't come in from other places, but 90% of the time, I think it comes in from an endpoint, from somebody on their getting affected at the endpoint. So minimizing the impact that that endpoint has not only on the back-end systems, but how it can impact the other endpoints that are in the same segment with it. Is there any reason in today's modern society for 2 laptops and a work group to be able to talk to each other on a network? Probably not. I would argue there is no reason, especially since they're more likely using either a SaaS application or a web-based application anyway that you're delivering to them. So why should they be able to file share between a group of computers, right? Start thinking about it in this way. How do I mitigate it? Because it's going to happen. You're not going to stop it. It will happen because the bad guys are better at it than we are, because they've got more time to focus on it than we do, because we're dealing with keeping the lights on, making sure people can print, doing things like that. But in reality, they've got all day to focus on it. So they're going to get in eventually. They're going to get around any protection, any new modern EDR, any XDR, whatever DR we want to put in front of it, right? Or let's call it, and I'll add that to the SPMs that are now out there. Whatever letter you put in front of it, wherever you're trying to detect and protect that, they're going to get around it eventually. Now, you're trying to make it as difficult as you can for them, but you do need these basic blocking and tackling kind of things. Good backups, good network segmentation, good access control, MFA, because all of these things, none of them are the panacea that's going to solve this, but every one of them are going to slow down a piece of it and maybe make you an unattractive target for the bad guy. So, and then I think start thinking about how your people do their business, because you can also minimize the impact and downtime to your customers on how you're delivering the application, how that they are interacting with your application, to where, yeah, you may have one or two people impacted, but you should hopefully never have the entire company now. And I think that's where we've really got to start thinking in the different ways of how we work.
All right, excellent. So I've heard about security in depth, which we've talked about for the past 20, 30 years anyway, right? Starting from when it was a basic flat network to then going about it and putting in LANs. And you talked about the endpoints, right? And so
yeah, well, we're also talking about another marketing term that I try not to ever mention. They put a whole nice little model around it.
Yeah, and we have, to your point, right? The endpoint is where people get in. And again, what I've seen in the industry is that they go after that map drive, right? They go after the Google Drive from the map share. And again, as I mentioned, right, that's where an EDR isn't effective, because they don't see that map drive and they don't see the attack against it. And it's easy for people to get in, right? And hopefully everybody follows best practices and they don't have anything sensitive on their laptop. And who cares? You send them a new laptop, re-image it, and it's off the basis.
But we know they're going to, right? We know they're going to. Yeah,
yeah, probably.
And I think that's why we've seen a little bit of the boom. And Bob, stop me if I cut you off. I was going to say, I think we're seeing a little bit of boom in that storage provider, where, because that has been a blind spot for the EDRs. Typically you couldn't put a tool on a storage device that acted like an EDR tool because of the operating systems or whatever. But you're seeing a lot of companies now put things in place that goes, hey, this level of CPU and write activity on a storage device probably means it's getting encrypted. So that's something we should, try to put a stop on. So I think we're doing things like that. They're just, none of them are perfect.
And then my last question really is about, you're both in a position where you have to have some sort of spend, you have to have a budget, right? So we continually see, as we've all said, ransomware attacks escalate. The price tag of a successful attack is escalating. And it just seems to me that the money still isn't being spent to try to protect yourself from ransomware. Everyone's like, you know what? It's not going to happen to me. I don't think that that's the risk that I want to spend the money on, right? So you're both in those positions. Can you just explain to me a little bit about the mindset, what you're thinking about, and how we have to start thinking about that risk?
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, I think new technology is always got a long tail on it when you're in a large corporate organization, because you've got some hoops to jump through, from a budgeting perspective, from a, kicking the tires on the solution perspective, and really evaluating the veracity of the, the product claims. So, I mean, I think it really comes down to, just basic assessment of your risk and looking at your control environment within your company and figuring out where you got gaps. And I think I mean, we just got to open up the paper and see what's happening with ransomware every week. And it's clear that every organization has risk around ransomware. And I think it, like we've talked about already, it's a game of escalation with the attackers. And, there's increasing sophistication, not necessarily in the nature of the attacks, because I think the attacks that we see are relatively unsophisticated a lot of times. I mean, it's a phishing attack that, they hop from machine to machine until they get something really juicy, and then they launch the encryption and data exfiltration. But I think the continued evolution of that criminal activity, I think, is really what we're combating. And that's I think where we got to come back to, what are the gaps and what are the technologies that are available in the marketplace to combat those gaps. And I think Ken called out the third party piece of this. Every organization is using the cloud. I mean, there's, whether you know it or not, I mean, we're all farming out specific business processes or, capabilities or technology solutions to third parties. And, sometimes that's just raw data storage like you have with, the big cloud providers. And sometimes that's data storage within a SaaS application. But we really got to look at all of that as risk surface for the ransomware threat. And I think, looking introspectively at those gaps, and again, going out to the marketplace and figuring out what are the capabilities, what are the emerging capabilities that are available, and really evaluating them against the risk tolerance of that organization.
Excellent. Ken, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob said it best just a minute ago about this, when he said you've got to understand your control set and your risk, right? And going back into not knowing, saying your company's not in the cloud. Yeah, they're in the cloud. It's like saying your company's not using AI. Yeah, they're using AI. You just don't know about it, right? But that right there, understanding your risk and being able to translate that into where the gaps in your capabilities are and why it's a risk value, gets into where you can start spending money on non-sexy things like a better backup solution, right? Because nobody likes it's hard to go in and sell a better backup solution. But if you understand what your gaps are about your ransomware risk and what your actual risk of being attacked is, and likelihood of that, then you can put a story around on why what you're doing today fails. And if we can, in our seat, take all that information about our environment and understand our control sets very well, understand what our actual risk is, put quantitative numbers around it, because we understand what revenue's at risk, we understand what it's going to cost us to recover from that. If this system goes down, how much is it going to impact the business or our customers? And once I have that baseline and can translate my program and sell my program up to why I need to spend the money on this thing that people are like, why are we worried about backups in today's day and age? Well, because this is still probably one of the fastest ways to get over these problems. If I have a well thought out backup plan that it gives me the ability, it's tested, we know it can work, and we're using the faster technology out there. I had a joke with somebody the other day. We were talking about they're still using DLT tapes. I was like, well, the truth is that's probably a very good air gap. You don't really have to worry about, and it takes so long to get it for anybody to get into it. It probably is a very solid ransomware protection methodology. But is it ideal? Absolutely not, because it's going to take a long time to get it back up and running. So I think that is the one nugget I would leave this with, is you better understand your risk and your gaps in the profile and what you have that you can close those gaps off, because having that discussion and having numbers around that are going to allow you to build your program and fill in those gaps much better.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time. I hope everybody who watches this gets to take away some gold nuggets on how to protect themselves from ransomware, where we're seeing it, why it continues. And I think my takeaway is try to protect it up front, use the tools and technology to protect it. And if you can't, please make sure that you have a proper backup, right? So you're both
and turn on MFA. Backup and MFA are the two big things that will at least slow it down and make you a little less attractive than the person who has none of that stuff on. So.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you. You're both experts in the field. I appreciate you taking the time to help me and educate everybody else out there. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.